This is part 5 of section 6.5. We're doing some applications with quadratics. Okay, so Rosa walks due north of home. Her husband, Ray, walks due east. By the time Rosa is 5 miles from home, the distance between them is 1 mile. 1 mile more than Ray's distance from home. How far from home is Ray? Let's draw a picture. So let's say this is their home. All right. Rosa walks due north. Okay. And Ray walks east. These north and east make a right angle. Okay. And we know something about the distance between them, which is going to be that diagonal after they've walked a certain amount of time. Okay. Now let's start labeling this. This is Rosa. The distance, by the time Rosa is 5 miles from home, so this is 5 miles right here. The distance between them, which is going to be this side, is 1 more than Ray's distance from home. Well, Ray is walking this way, so let's say he walks X miles. The distance between them is 1 more than this, so this is going to be X plus 1 right here. Okay? Now, you need to recall what we know about right triangles. If we have a right triangle and we have some of the sides, then we can use the Pythagorean Theorem. Call one of these two sides A and B. The ones that make up a right angle are A and B. The one opposite the right angle is C. It does not matter which of these you call which. And then the Pythagorean Theorem says A squared plus B squared is equal to C squared. So if I take this and I plug it in here, I'm going to have 5 squared plus X squared is equal to X plus 1 squared. Okay. Now I need to multiply this side out. And you need to remember how that works. I cannot just take this and put it on each one. That property only works if these things are multiplied together, and they're not. So what I've got here, even though I have it written in the opposite direction, we have X plus 1, we have something like this. And so we need to end up with something like this when we multiply it out. Either you remember the pattern, or you rewrite this as A plus B times A plus B, and then distribute. This is going to be 25 plus X squared. And the way we talk ourselves through this is you square your first term, write down the sign from the middle, multiply these two things together, and that would be X. And then you double that, which will give me 2X. So you multiply them together and then double it, which gives me the 2X. Plus, this is always a plus here. You square your last term, which is a 1. Okay, so I've got a quadratic. I've got squares in here. So my first step is I'm going to try to get a 0 on one side. So let's say I move this over here. But if I'm subtracting X squared from both sides, they both just go away, right? So now I have a pretty easy problem. I have 25 is equal to 2X plus 1. Okay, so let's subtract 1 from each side to get 24 is equal to 2X. And divide both sides by a 2, and you get 12. Okay, so we solved the equation. We need to figure out what the answer to the whole problem is. Okay, we are asked how far from home is Ray. Well, Ray is walking to the east. He walked X miles, and I know it's miles because of this. So Ray is 12 miles from home. Okay, and if you want to do a quick check, 5, if this is 12, this would be 13. Is 5 squared plus 12 squared equal to 13 squared? That's 25 plus 144 is equal to 169. And if you combine these together, you will see 169 equals 169. So this answer does make sense. It's a positive number. It makes sense within the Pythagorean Theorem, and we're good. Okay, let's look at this problem. Now, one thing I want to tell you is I've seen this kind of problem appear on the departmental final a lot. And it sounds a whole lot worse than it actually is. Okay? If an object is propelled upward from a height of s feet at an initial velocity of v feet per second, then its height h after t seconds is given by the equation h is equal to negative 16 t squared plus vt plus s, where h is in feet. If the object is propelled from a height of 4 feet with an initial velocity of 64 feet per second, its height h is given by the equation h is equal to negative 16 t squared plus 64 t plus 4. Okay, all of that sounds horrible, but really we do not need this equation whatsoever. This is the general, and then they tell you in the second part what your v is and what your t is. And so basically they've given you the entire formula that you need. None of this first part is needed at all. It kind of tells you what your things are standing for, so you know that this is the height, this is the velocity, but they give you the formula to use, okay? After how many seconds is the height 32 feet? Okay, now I'm going to draw a quick picture so we can have an idea of what we're looking at. So we start off and we're going to throw, let's say, a ball. We're going to throw a ball in the air, and we're starting off 4 feet above the ground. So when we throw a ball from here, it's going to take this basic shape, right? It's going to go up, and then it's going to hit the ground. And we want to know how many seconds does it take for our ball to be 32 feet off the ground? Well, if 32 feet is up here, it never gets there, and we have 0 answers. If it comes right here, and that's the top of it, we only get 1 answer. But if 32 feet is here, we can have 2 answers. Okay? So we don't really know how many answers we're going to get here. It depends on the problem. A negative number will not make sense here because, well, time runs forwards. So we're going to have positive answers for time. All right, after how many seconds is the height 32 feet? So I'm going to take 32 and I'm going to plug it in right there. So that gives me 32 is equal to negative 16 t squared plus 64 t plus 4. Okay, now we really want our first number to be positive because we're going to have to factor this, and we need a 0. So even though it's going to be kind of ugly, I'm going to take all 3 of these and move them to the other side. So here I would be adding 16t squared to both sides, so that gives me 16t squared. Here I'm subtracting 64t from both sides. Okay. And here I'd be subtracting 4. 32 minus 4 is 28. And now it's equal to 0. Okay, now remember how I said, well, we need to factor out a GCF if we have one. And also, if you can divide everything by the same number, you can make your number smaller and make the whole thing easier. If I look at these values, these numbers are all even, and that's 0. And that means I can divide everything by at least a 2. And that would make my number smaller, and so it's easier to work with. But I can actually do a bit better than 2. All of these are also divisible by 4. So I am going to try that. This is not a necessary step. It is completely workable if you do not do this. But I'm going to divide everything by 4 so I get some nicer numbers. And remember, you are technically dividing the 0 by 4 as well. It's just going to stay at 0. When I do that, I get 4t squared minus 16t plus 7 is equal to 0. I'm double checking my work here, and that looks good. Okay. So this is what I want to factor. I have a trinomial here with no GCF. A number in front here, not perfect square. So I'm looking for 2 numbers that multiply to a positive 28, and that means they're both going to have the same sign. They're both positive or both negative, and that's because it's multiplying to a positive number. And I want to add to a negative 16. So that means I'm going to have a negative times a negative. A negative times a negative gives you a positive, and when you add 2 negatives, you get a negative. Okay? So things that multiply to 28. are 1 and 28, 2 and 14, 3 doesn't work, 4 and 7, and that's it. Now, I said all of these would need to be negative, and to get a negative 16, the negative 2 and negative 14 will work. Okay, I believe this is the first time we've had two negatives here when we are going to factoring by grouping. And I know I talked about how it's always nicer if you have a plus to put it second, so you have the plus sign in the middle. I also talked, when we first talked about factoring by grouping, about rearranging things so that they help out. But then there's that one other possibility. There's no good way to rearrange this to make everything nice. Normally, if I'm trying to rearrange something, I try to switch these two middle ones, and that just doesn't work. I need a plus sign in the middle. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change this right here, minus 14t, to plus negative 14t. You know that's the same thing. Plus a negative is the same thing as a minus. When I do that, I get 4t squared minus 2t plus negative 14t plus 7 equals 0. And now, because this is the plus sign, I can put in my brackets. Now, why was it so important? It's because if I put a bracket right here with the negative on the outside, that would indicate that this negative should be distributed, and it would change this to a minus sign, and we can't have that. Okay? From this first group, I can factor out a 2 and a t, and that leaves 2t minus 1 plus. From these two, I can factor out a 7. That will give me a negative 2t and a plus 1. Notice I'm trying to match this, but if I factor out a positive 7, they don't match. So I'm going to factor out a negative 7 instead, because the only difference was my signs. Now this will give me a positive 2t and a minus 1 equals 0. Okay? So now I'm coming up here, and I have 2t minus 1 times 2t plus negative 7, which is the same as minus 7, equals 0. We set each of these equal to 0. And solve. Here I'm going to add 1 to both sides. Here I'm going to add 7 to both sides. I get 2t is equal to 1, or 2t is equal to 7. Divide both sides by 2, and you get 1/2. Divide both sides by 2, and you get 7/2. All right, so I have two answers to this equation. What's the answer to the problem? After how many seconds is the height 32 feet? Well, these are both positive numbers, right? So they both could make sense. These are, the ball is 32 feet off the ground after 1/2 second, or 0.5 seconds. And that's going to be 3.5, so 3.5 seconds. Both of these make sense if this is the basic idea of what we're doing.